Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen. We'll get right into our hazards for today because we have quite a lot to talk about. Starting with the North Slope, we have winter weather advisories in effect for much of the North Slope and winter storm warning in effect for the northwest coast along the Chukchi Sea. Those are all going to be for blowing snow, decreasing visibility at times to a quarter to a half a mile, which is going to make travel difficult. Also, cold wind chills as cold temperatures are in place, and those winds are going to make it feel even colder. So along the Chukchi coast in particular, we are looking at wind chills as low as negative 70 degrees. Those are going to be in effect all the way through the day tomorrow. For the west coast, we have winter storm warnings in effect. That's that red that you see, except for the western tip of Seward Peninsula as well as St. Lawrence Island. Those areas actually have a blizzard warning in effect where we're going to be seeing snow and blowing snow with strong winds that are going to be reducing the visibility down to less than a quarter mile pretty significantly over the period of time through the night tonight. So a blizzard warning in effect for those areas. A lot of the rest of the west coast under winter storm warning through tonight. That's going to be also for snow and blowing snow with visibility dropping to between a quarter and a half of a mile. So also hindering travel with those winds and snow conditions as well. Along the western interior, we have winter weather advisories in effect through the night tonight, and those are going to be for snow and blowing snow as well, but probably those visibilities not quite as bad as in the winter storm warning areas. So still expect some difficult visibilities, but maybe down to about a half a mile at times. Along the Alaska range, we are looking at a high wind warning in effect through the night tonight. Those are going to be for wind gusts up to 75 miles per hour, especially through the passes in the Alaska range. So some difficult travel conditions through the passes with those high winds through tonight. We also have a wind advisory in effect for the Delta Junction area. That is going to be for some windy conditions there as well. And that could be impacting especially any holiday decorations anybody in the Delta Junction area has up around their house. Make sure to keep an eye on them with those strong winds in the area. Taking a look a little bit further south from south central along the Gulf Coast down through the Panhandle, we have a blizzard warning in effect for the Turnagain Pass area. That's going to be through midnight tonight for deteriorating and already deteriorated really conditions along the highway there. Expecting wind gusts up to about 50 miles per hour with snow, creating blowing snow conditions and very low visibilities with difficult to impossible travel conditions through the area. So not a good time to be traveling through Turnagain Pass. We also have a high wind warning in effect starting this evening at 6 p.m. and lasting through the night tonight for the Cordova area with wind gusts expected up to 75 miles per hour. So once again, those winds are going to be capable of bringing down trees and potentially causing power outages, as well as definitely blowing around any outside holiday decorations. So it might be a good time to bring those in the Cordova area if you haven't already. We have continuing flood advisories in effect for both the Seward area as well as the Anchor River between Sterling Highway and Cook Inlet. We've got heavy rain along the Kenai Peninsula today. That's going to potentially cause ice jams as well as minor flooding along the Anchor River. And then in the Seward area with snow yesterday and then heavy rain today, expect some of those drainages to be blocked with all the snow, causing some flooding in low-lying areas where the water can't drain because of all the snow from yesterday. Moving further east into the Panhandle, we are looking at a high wind warning in effect from about Yakutat all the way down the north coast to about Sitka. That is going to be for wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour. It is in effect tonight and into the morning hours on Wednesday. Again, those winds gusting to 60 miles per hour are going to be capable of downing some trees, potentially causing some power outages, and another area where it's going to be probably a good plan to bring in those holiday decorations as long as those high winds are a threat for the area. We also have a winter storm warning in effect for the Haines and Klondike highways. That's going to be up at elevation a little bit, where we're expecting anywhere from about 6 to 12 inches of new snow between 6 p.m. this evening and about 9 a.m. on Wednesday. So mostly overnight tonight and a little bit into tomorrow morning. That's going to create really difficult travel conditions on the Haines Highway as well as the Klondike Highway up near White Pass. Finally, we have a winter storm warning going into effect for the southern panhandle, and that's going to be from about 3 a.m. tonight, overnight, through Wednesday night. So almost a 24-hour period where we have that winter storm warning in effect for the southern panhandle. That's going to be for heavy snow, new snow of 14 to 18 inches. So a lot of weather going on across the state. Let's take a look at satellite imagery and we can see what's causing this weather. We've got one swirl happening in the Bering Sea, and that's going to be moving up into the west coast and bringing some of this weather impacting the west coast. We also have another swirl coming up into south central from the Gulf. That's going to be what's bringing all of that rain as well as wind to the Gulf Coast itself. For our service charts, we can see those low pressure systems that we saw swirling on the satellite imagery. So 956 millibars, very strong low pressure system in the Bering, also connected to a secondary 961 millibar low over the St. Lawrence Island area today. And then that low in the Gulf, 976 millibars, it's actually coming in on the coattails of another low that has dissipated at this point, but brought the first part of that 1-2 punch with all the snow and some high winds into the south central area yesterday and into today. For tonight, we have all of our low pressure systems across the area weakening, and so we may see some improvement tonight, especially along the west coast, but we'll still see those windy conditions for the Gulf Coast as well as plenty of rain still coming into the Kenai Peninsula. For Wednesday, we have high pressure coming into command for the Gulf of Alaska, so some reprieve there for the coastal Gulf Coast areas. Some snow continuing over the interior, but those low pressure systems on the west coast continuing to weaken. For Thursday, we have new low pressure systems coming up into the Gulf, not creating a whole lot of impact yet on the state, but we'll definitely be keeping an eye on these going forward over the next couple of days. And for temperatures on Wednesday morning, definitely cold along the north slope with negative teens. We're looking at 0 degrees to the negative single digits across much of the interior. A little bit warmer on the west coast with that storm coming in, temperatures in the 20s. We're looking at 30s for south central and even as high as 40 for the panhandle. For Wednesday afternoon, we are looking at a warming trend over the southern part of the state with 30s all the way from the southwestern portion of the state through south central across the Gulf Coast and even some mid 40s into the panhandle. Temperatures getting up into the negative single digits for the north slope and some positive single digits to teens across the interior. For Thursday morning, a little bit warmer along the north slope with mostly negative single digits. Also warmer across the interior with positive single digits for Thursday morning. Somewhat cooler as that low pressure system moves on by, and maybe we even get some clearing skies across south central with temperatures in the 20s, and also cooler in the panhandle with temperatures dropping into the 30s. And finally, for Thursday afternoon, we have temperatures in the positive single digits to teens across most of the interior, with temperatures in the 30s once again for south central, and again upper 30s to mid 40s for the panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to your aviation weather, starting with flying weather for Wednesday morning. We have a number of areas of IFR conditions, including much of the Gulf Coast, stretching all the way from Cook Inlet through Prince William Sound and further east to the entirety of the panhandle associated with that system in the Gulf. We also have another system producing IFR conditions in the Bering, and a third system that's going to be bringing some IFR conditions to the far western Aleutians for Wednesday morning. Wednesday afternoon, we start to see some improvement across the Gulf Coast, with the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet improving to VFR, but IFR remaining from about Prince William Sound east to Yakutat, as well as the inland portions of the Panhandle. Also, IFR conditions developing across much of the interior lowlands, stretching up to the southern end of the Brooks Range and west to the Chukchi Sea. We'll also see some IFR conditions developing across the southwestern portion of the state, the coastal areas there, including Nunivak Island. For Thursday morning, improvement along the Gulf Coast, again with mostly NVFR conditions with some VFR conditions mixed in there, but we'll see IFR conditions developing across the North Slope as well as the Norton Sound area. For Thursday afternoon, we continue to see IFR conditions along the North Slope, and those IFR conditions from Norton Sound actually shifting further north up to the Chukchi Sea coast and into the southern Brooks Range. Also, IFR conditions developing across Bristol Bay and into the Alaska Peninsula on Thursday afternoon. For our pass conditions on Wednesday, Anaktuvuk Pass starting the day VFR, but deteriorating in the afternoon to IFR conditions. Same story at Adigan Pass with VFR in the morning, deteriorating to IFR in the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Passes both looking at the opposite trend, starting the day out IFR, but improving to VFR during the afternoon hours on Wednesday. But during the afternoon, we will see some MVFR conditions hanging around the west entrances of both Lake Clark and Merrill Passes. Rainy Pass starting the day on Wednesday, MVFR improving to VFR, but we'll see some MVFR conditions in the afternoon along the east entrance of Rainy Pass. Windy Pass starting the day VFR on Wednesday and deteriorating to IFR Wednesday afternoon. Isabel Pass also starting VFR and deteriorating to MVFR conditions Wednesday afternoon. Mentasta Pass expected to be VFR all day on Wednesday. Tanita Pass expected to be MVFR all day on Wednesday. Portage Pass starting the day out IFR, but having some improvement Wednesday afternoon to MVFR. And Chilkoot and White Passes both expected to be IFR all day on Wednesday. Freezing levels, surface freezing level looking like it's going to be stretching from the Aleutians up into the Alaska Peninsula and across much of the Gulf Coast and the higher terrain of the Panhandle. We have our warmer air coming up into the Panhandle with freezing levels from 2,000 to about 4,000 feet across the Panhandle itself. For icing on Wednesday, we do have one area of considerable moderate icing stretching from east of Prince William Sound across to Yakutat and the northern Panhandle. That's going to be considerable moderate icing above 5,000 feet. Also, we'll see some isolated moderate icing above 3,000 feet for both the Alaska Range as well as the rest of the Panhandle, and between about 3,000 feet and 9,000 feet for much of the rest of the mainland as well as the Bering Sea. Our jet stream on Wednesday, very clear arcing pattern with south winds coming up into the Panhandle, 150 to 155 knots out of the south, arcing across western Canada. Also a secondary jet across the west coast, also out of the south, peaking at about 75 knots. At 9,000 feet, we have our strongest winds once again coming into the Panhandle, 70 to 85 knots out of the south and southwest. Some other peaks, 50 to 60 knots across much of the rest of the Gulf Coast, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. At 3,000 feet, again, we see 65 to 75 knot winds coming up out of the south and southwest into the Panhandle, with increased winds also for the Prince William Sound area, peaking about 55 knots out of the southwest. For turbulence on Wednesday, we are looking at a couple of areas of isolated moderate turbulence below 6,000 feet. That's going to be over much of the Panhandle for Wednesday below 6,000 feet, as well as some isolated moderate turbulence potential below 6,000 feet across the Alaska Peninsula and into the eastern portion of Bristol Bay. We'll also see some considerable moderate turbulence below 8,000 feet north of the Alaska Range, below 6,000 feet across south central, and below 4,000 feet for much of the Aleutians, as well as St. Lawrence Island and the Seward Peninsula.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again, talking about the augmented reality sandbox, is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version. Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney. And
this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. Allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool, and
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
Well, that's what happened at GINA, up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that, and to see how it reacts in time, and
Right.
it's a dynamic learning tool, and it
Dynamic,
responds.
That's exactly the word.
And
Yeah.
you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching
Right.
tool for
Where does it
topography
go?
can it have. You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work with GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding the weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
Wow.
Would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney. Thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts. And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for a look at your marine forecast. Starting out with the sea ice edge, we're seeing that there's just a couple of slivers of open area left in the Chukchi Sea. Some of that ice is still thin, but mostly ice covered for the Chukchi Sea at this point. We're also seeing the ice edge coming right up on to the coast of St. Lawrence Island. That's how far it's making it. That ice is thickening in Norton Sound, and we are looking at, with all of the systems that have been coming through, the ice in the Bristol Bay area has actually been deteriorating, and so most of that ice at this point is gone. Taking a look at winds and seas for southeast, this is where we're going to have our strongest winds and highest seas on Wednesday, with winds out of the southeast at 35 to 45 knots over the Gulf area, with seas peaking around 30 feet on Wednesday. For Thursday, those winds and seas are coming down quite a bit, although we will still see the potential for some gales with winds of 35 knots out of the southwest off the southern panhandle. For the inside waterways, 15 to 30 knot winds and 3-foot seas in Lynn Canal to about 10-foot seas for the southern panhandle inside waterways. For the south central area on Wednesday, we are looking at winds 15 to about 30 knots, generally out of the south and west. Although we do have some southeast flow in Prince William Sound and the northern Gulf there. Seas in the Gulf 13 to 17 feet, about 6 feet for Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet. For Thursday, those winds coming down just a little bit, 15 to 30 knots, generally out of the west with some northerly flow in Cook Inlet. Seas not a whole lot of change, still about 13 to 16 feet across the Gulf. For Wednesday, across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas, winds out of the west and northwest 20 to 25 knots, with seas ranging anywhere from about 8 to 13 feet. Looking ahead into Thursday, those winds coming down just a little bit, 10 to 25 knots. Also shifting a bit with some northeasterly flow in Bristol Bay. Seas coming down a bit as well, 2 to 4 feet on the Bering Sea side and 8 to 10 feet on the Gulf side. For the Aleutian chain, 10 to 25 knot winds with pretty much due easterly flow on Wednesday. As we head into Thursday, we'll see those winds come up a little bit. Still easterly flow for the eastern Aleutians, but some northwesterly flow For the western Aleutians, strongest winds 35 to 40 knots on the south side of the central Aleutians there, with seas peaking 14 to about 19 feet for Thursday. Along the west coast on Wednesday, we're looking at winds anywhere from 10 to about 30 knots, with strongest winds just outside of Norton Sound and south of St. Lawrence Island. Seas in the 6 to 8 foot range on Wednesday. And as we head into Thursday, winds generally coming down a bit out of the west for Norton Sound and some easterly flow as we head into the southern Bering down near the Pribilovs. For the Arctic coast on Wednesday, we are looking at easterly flow for the North Slope, 15 to 20 knots, and north to northeasterly flow through the Chukchi, 15 to about 30 knots, with also 30 knots coming out of the Bering Strait. And for Thursday, we are looking at a wind switch, so more onshore westerly flow for the entire Arctic coast, anywhere from 15 to about 25 knots. Taking a look at our surface charts and recapping what we're expecting, we have that second punch low pressure system coming into south central tonight. That is going to be bringing high winds and some low visibility with blowing snow to the Turnagain Pass area, where a blizzard warning remains in effect until midnight. We also have a high wind warning in effect for the Cordova area tonight. Also some heavy rain today, possibly lasting into tonight for parts of the Kenai Peninsula, so keep an eye out for some minor flooding there. We also have those high wind warnings in effect for the northern panhandle, those coastal areas, with snow along the Haines and Klondike highways. And as we head into Wednesday, we see those low pressure systems approaching the west coast, and that is where we have snow and blowing snow, with winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories in effect for much of the west coast for tonight and into tomorrow morning. Also for the North Slope, it's going to be particularly cold and windy. So in addition to blowing snow, wind chills as low as -70 degrees for the Chukchi coast tonight and into Wednesday. So make sure to bundle up there. Thanks so much for watching Alaska TV Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.